how many barrels overall Alberta is producing currently?
How many barrels overall per day?
Yeah.
I think we know that number. I'm just trying to remember.
I believe the challenge is I'm trying to remember between oil sands and the total of oil sands.
Right, both conventional
we just hit
sands.
over 3 million barrels a day, I believe, in the oil sands.
Much so?
I think we just hit over 3 million barrels a day from the oil
Really?
sands. And I think a more critical question is when you're looking at pipeline transport and rail transport.
I come to that.
Certainly.
So, and how much is exported out of the 3 million or 3.5 million barrels?
It's about 98%, isn't it?
It's certainly over 90%. It's,
Is exported.
Over 90% is exported. We could say that safely.
Okay. How much Alberta will export in 5 years from now and 10 years from now? Do you have any forecast?
I'm just looking to see if I have the cap forecast. I think that's usually a good one to take a look at.
Okay. While you're looking for that, because time is short, so and what is Alberta's pipeline capacity today in terms of barrels per day, and how much of that is going to U.S. markets?
So again, almost all of that is going to U.S. markets. Almost all of what's being taken away by pipeline is going to U.S. markets. Over 90%. I don't have the precise figure off the top of my head, but it'd be over 90%.
So 90% of the finished product, or is it the bitumen?
Of the bitumen, I think all of our product is 90% of any of the products, I believe, is going, certainly of bitumen and crude.
How much of it is upgraded synthetic crude, and how much of it is raw bitumen?
Well, I can give some general information on that. I'm sorry, sir, I don't have the specific numbers on that.
Can you supply that to us later?
We can provide some specific numbers. Certainly, the Alberta Energy Regulator reports that information publicly, and it's ST98.
Yeah. I would have expected your team to be on the top of it. It should be on your fingertips.
But it's about a third that is upgraded and refined in the province. Most of that is upgrading, primarily Suncor, Syncrude, Horizon oil sands projects. We have, of course, about 400,000 barrels a day in refining capacity. We are a major hub for that, but most of that is used across Western Canada. So that's not very much exported into the States. Primarily, we export our conventional oil and our synthetic oil and our crude bitumen diluted. Most of that, that's about is over 90% of our production that goes primarily into the U.S. Midwest, and then some flows down to the U.S. Gulf Coast.
Right, and how much of it is going to actually to the Tidewater to go to overseas markets, non-U.S. markets?
A relatively small amount, because the major refineries that are fed are in the U.S. Midwest. As we've had more production, we've seen some reversals of pipelines and some new pipelines built in the U.S. that'll move it down from Cushing to the U.S. Gulf Coast. That's still relatively small, although it's growing. And of course, we've got about 300,000 barrels a day that go out on the current Trans Mountain system. And that's the critical piece to get that expanded up by another, I think, around 400,000 barrels a day to be able to achieve that access.
Yeah, so how much of the current existing 300,000 barrels Trans Mountain is actually going to overseas markets? Or is it all going just to U.S.?
There's basically three areas that it goes to, and they will vary a bit. The maximum that can go out export, if I remember the capacity of the dock, is about 75,000 barrels a day, and that's really what you can export. But generally less than that, if I remember correctly, is exported. So there's a refinery in Burnaby. There's the potential to export off the dock. And then there is the pipeline that goes down into the U.S. and feeds the refineries in Washington State.
So
and they're fairly significant.
From the current 300,000 barrels capacity we have, so it's shipping some bitumen, some finished products, or is it shipping all finished products?
It's shipping a mix. It's a batched pipeline. So it's able to put a batch of light oil, a batch of synthetic. It can move diesel as well, and it also moves the heavy oil down to the refineries.
So how much of it is pure bitumen? Out of 300,000, because my point is we are only getting full value of it if you export it non-US markets or if you're shipping finished products. And my other question is, I mean, we put all our eggs in one basket. Now we are saying, okay, we have 300,000 barrels to West Coast, and then we are going to add 600,000 barrels more when it gets built, God knows when. And so after that, assuming we actually build that expansion project, after adding 600,000 more, you said we are producing currently 3.5 million barrels, but in 5 or 10 years, the production may be 5 million barrels or 6 million barrels. So how much more pipeline capacity do we need not to have a bottleneck after finishing this expansion?
The work that we've done, looking at forecasts from CAP, forecasts from IHS, and forecasts from other companies, generally tends to say that the expected increase in production will be fairly close to what line 3 is when line comes on. So we'll still be relatively full with line 3. And TMX will take some of that away, but we don't really achieve an excess of pipeline capacity until Keystone XL comes on. That's a pretty significant expansion, and that would give a fair bit of room. If I remember correctly, with Keystone, with all three of those, depending on which of those forecasts you look at, we're probably able to produce up until 2030 in that range. There's a lot of uncertainty when you get out into that area.
Yeah. No. So again,
Mr. Panda, I'm going to rotate. I'm going to rotate back to you. Okay.
Yeah. One follow-up.
One follow-up.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So again, like you said, line 3 is a replacement again going through U.S. and Keystone is again going to U.S. So so it's the different. It won't help reduce the differential fully. We might reduce the differential by a few dollars, but by the time those two, line 3 and Keystone expansion is built, it's several years away. In the meantime, shipment by rail, in the last year and a half, there is a surge in rail shipments and may double by the following year. So what's the maximum amount of oil that can be moved to Tidewater by rail? And is Alberta Energy concerned about the escalation of crude by rail for safety reasons? And are you hearing those concerns from Albertans?
Can I just go back, Mr. Panda, to something you just mentioned earlier on the impact of the differential? I think the expansion of pipelines will have a significant impact on the differential, a far greater impact on the differential than the idea of diversifying markets. There is the cost, the big factor in the differential is how much it costs for us to get our products to the major markets, which right now is the United States. If we're shipping it there by rail, that is much more expensive than shipping it by pipeline. So as we get sufficient pipeline capacity, there's a direct impact on the differential, and it can be quite a significant impact on the differential. So that will be a major benefit. It's a little harder to quantify how much the benefit is of having diversified markets. It's obviously something that we want and something that's very important for us, but it's just harder to quantify the impact, the precise impact on the differential. Whereas we know that the difference between rail and pipelines is very easily quantifiable and significant. So in response to your questions around moving crude by rail, and maximum capacity. There are many, many things that impact the capacity of rail. It is there are loading facilities, the availability of locomotives, the availability of cars. There are a number of pieces to that, and that is a piece that as the Premier noted yesterday, that is something that we are now looking at. And so it's in the early stages in terms of what can be done and what should be done on that, but it is certainly work that we're undertaking right now.
Thank you. I'll wait for